dear students, I welcome you to our course of lectures on the history of the English language. A course of history of the English language consists of two major parts. The first part is called an introduction to Germanic philology. The second part is called a history of the English language proper. An introduction to Germanic philology. Let's first of all make clear the term which is understood by this one. An introduction. Why is introduction? Because there are so many Germanic languages living and dead, and we have no time to discuss all of these ones. And why Germanic? Because the English language belongs to Germanic group of languages. Therefore, we'll discuss philology of Germanic language, not philology of the English language. It will be a bit wrong. Next, why philology? Philology, as we have already mentioned, also mentioned words said by Abdullah Avlani, deals with two aspects of human activity, language and literature. In this respect here, we discuss Germanic languages and literature created in these Germanic languages. Therefore, Germanic philology, that's why introduction to Germanic philology. And in order to discuss Germanic languages, we should first of all understand how many languages are there in this world. As you know, some people say there are 2,000 languages. Some say 3,000, 4,000, 5, even 7,000 languages. Some people say. The correct number is 6,000 languages. There are 6,000 languages in the world. And all these languages exist in the form of language having its own phonetic structure, grammatical structure, and vocabulary. Therefore, it is a separate language. But still, those languages have some languages have some similar features in phonetic structure, grammatical structure, and vocabulary. Those languages having similar features in those structures are united under one family. As languages belong to one family, languages which developed from one parent language. This parent language is called proto-language. In respect to the English language, we can say the proto-language, Indo-European proto-language is the parent language of the English language. If we speak about the Uzbek language, we can say Altaic proto-language is parent language of the Uzbek language. It's just like for comparison. It's just for comparison. Now, these languages, out of 6,000 languages, Indo-European languages make 449 languages. 449 languages are from 6,000 languages. And if there are 449 Indo-European languages in the world, there should be some numbers of Germanic languages. Total number of Germanic languages existing in this world is 49. 49. But we cannot discuss all those 49 languages because there are too many for our short course. And we discuss only main, essential, living Germanic languages. There are 12. And these 12 languages should be discussed from different approaches. There are some aspects of study. There should be some aspects of study. And the first, now I'll name those aspects of study. The first one is structural aspect. Structural aspect. Here, What is understood by structural aspect? What do we mean when we say structural aspect? All languages we discuss dividing language as a structural unit. And here, words are structures, phrases are structures, sentences are structures. They have we know word structure, phrase structure, sentence structure, etc., etc. And therefore, this aspect is called structure. There can be structures, simple structures, complicated structures, etc., etc. Second one is genetical aspect. Genetically, languages can be related languages, non-related languages. If languages develop from one source, from one parent language, it's called a related language. For example, English, Russian, Persian, these are related languages. If languages develop from different parent languages and they are from different families of languages, they are called non-related languages. For example, English, Uzbek, Japanese, etc., etc. Or English, Tajik, Uzbek, Tajik, Arabic, just like example. They are non-related languages. Next aspect is geographical aspect. Geographically, languages can be of two types. First, endemic languages, and second, pandemic languages. Endemic language is used only in one country. Pandemic language is used in two or more countries. 95% of languages are endemic languages. Only 5% of the languages out of 6,000 are pandemic languages. English, Arabic, Russian, Spanish, French are pandemic languages. Uh, pandemic languages. Many languages are spoken in one country. Next one is quantitative aspect. Here, numerical volume of the speakers in this or that language is taken into consideration. For example, the Chinese language holds the first position in the world according to the number of speakers. This is quantitative aspect. Next comes typological aspect. Typologically, there are four types of languages: flective languages, agglutinative languages, isolated or amorphous languages, and polysynthetic languages. Flective languages are divided into two types: synthetic languages, analytic languages. In synthetic languages, synthetic structure of the word is dominating type of forming grammatical form of the word. In analytical languages, analytic forms are dominating type of forming grammatical structure of the word. Latin, Russian, German, Sanskrit, Old English was, synthetic languages. Spanish, not Spanish, French, Farsi, and some others are analytical languages. The English language has the elements of synthetic type and analytical type. Next, social linguistic aspect. Then comes agglutinative languages. In agglutinative languages, each grammatical meaning has its grammatical way of expressing this meaning. Therefore, words in agglutinative languages are very long. We'll know it from the Uzbek language. Uzbek language is an agglutinative language, you know. Next comes amorphous languages. The prefix "a" means no. Morph means form. Formless languages. What form? This is grammatical form is meant by amorphous. It means languages which have no certain grammatical forms. They are put side by side, like bricks, and form phrases and sentences, like the Chinese language. Next comes polysynthetic words. Polysynthetic languages. In polysynthetic languages, synthesis as a way of expressing grammatical meaning reaches its top. And here, one word is equal to one sentence. Eskimo language, Chukcha language, and others are examples of this kind of language structure. Next comes social linguistic aspect. Social linguistic aspect deals with the interrelation between language and society. The essential notions here are language policy, language situation, language policy, language planning, etc., etc. We know two types of three types of language situation: monolingual language situation, bilingual language situation, and polylingual language situation. In monolingual language situation, we observe the formula: one language, one country, one language. In bilingual language situation, we observe one country, two languages. In polylingual language structure, we observe one country, more than two languages. You see, therefore, this is called multilingual or polylingual language situation. There are two types of bilingualism. Bilingualism proper and diglossia. In bilingualism, the languages used in a society, or in a country, have equal status or equal power. In diglossia, they don't have equal status. One of the language used in this country is preferable, and second one is socially ignored language. See, there are two types of language policy: constructive language policy and destructive language policy. If state wants to develop the functional aspect of a language, then language policy is constructive. If the language wants to ban the language used in a certain language, the policy will be destructive policy here. Constructive and language policy. Then comes the problem of language changes. Everything changes in this world. Languages also change. There are two tendencies in the process of language development. The first one is integration, and second one is differentiation. In integration, dialects or languages develop towards obtaining common features in phonetic structure, grammatical structure, and vocabulary. And in differentiation, dialects or languages develop towards obtaining different features in phonetic structure, grammatical structure, and vocabulary to form new languages. As a result of integration, one language comes into existence out of different dialects. For example, some 6,000 years ago, the Indo-European language was a sum of different dialects. For example, there were Proto-Germanic language, Proto-Celtic language, Proto-Romance language, Proto-Indian, Proto-Iranian, Proto-Slavic, etc., etc. As a result of the development, which is called integration, out of these dialects, one language developed. Later, it was called Indo-European language. You see, later, as a result of the differentiation, when the number of speakers became too many, too great, these dialects, which later developed into languages, began developing on, and as a result of differentiation, uh, from those proto-languages developed groups of languages. For example, from Proto-Germanic, three languages later developed, which will later became groups of languages. For example, East Germanic languages, West Germanic languages, and North Germanic languages. Uh, Integration and differentiation always go side by side. We cannot give an example to any integration which stopped with integrating as a result of integration, but differentiation is still going on. As an example to differentiation, we can give, for example, development of the English language. For example, from Proto-Germanic, from Proto-Indo-European, it developed to Proto-Germanic, to Proto-West Germanic, and from West Germanic to English language, from English to national varieties. Let's take American English. American English also went on developing, and as a result of the differentiation, they formed Western group of dialects, Central group of Eastern group of dialects, and these groups of dialects differentiated and formed new dialects, and those dialects also developed. In this way, we go to an individual speaker of this or that language. In this way, we explain why speech of two people differ from each other's speech. That's the result of differentiation. That is how differentiation is going on. Now, a few words about causes of language change. There should be some changes which make the language change. Otherwise, we cannot explain why from Proto-Indo-European differentiation was still going on to ordinary speakers of American English. There are two types of factors of language change. First one is extra-linguistic factors, and the second one, intra-linguistic factors of language change. Extra-linguistic factors of language change include geographical factors, social factors, and temporal factors. What is meant by geographical factor? By geographical factor, we understand those mountains, rivers, seas, oceans, etc., etc. And as a result of the geographical factors, out of 5 or more dialects, one language may arise. All as a result of, because mountain and the seas make it difficult to communicate, and their dialect begins developing in its own way. See, second, social. Social means relation of the society to the language. As a social factor, we understand invasions, occupations, wars, etc., etc. As a result of these great social disasters, languages change greatly. Some languages may die out, Some languages change their state, and they become different from what which was spoken earlier. Next, temporal feature. As we have already mentioned, time changes everything, and time changes the languages too. Therefore, speech of parents is a bit different than the speech of their children, and their speech is different from their parents, that is, grandparents of those children. See, this is the result of temporal factors. Now, intralinguistic factors. Intralinguistic factors of language change include phonetic changes, spelling changes, grammatical changes, lexical changes, and stylistic changes. Phonetic changes include all changes taking place in the phonetic structure of the word. That is, like consonant-vowel changes, modification, assimilation, aspiration, etc., etc. These are phonetic changes. They are qualitative and quantitative changes, situational and independent changes. All these changes make the language change, and as a result of it, the language becomes different. The language becomes, for example, we know the changes in pronunciation between American and British English. You see, as one of the factors of which changed the language. Next, spelling changes. Positional and independent changes were not mentioned. Positional change is a change which takes place in certain positions, and independent change may take place at any language in kind of the type of the syllable of the word. Spelling change. Spelling changes include all kinds of changes taking place in writing of words. For example, we can say honor, honor, color, color, etc., etc. Next, grammatical changes. Grammatical changes are not observed so often, because if grammar changes, a new language will come into existence. Therefore, grammatical change is the most stable element of language structure. Grammatical changes are very stable, and change in the grammatical structure makes the language change. Lexical changes are widening, narrowing, metaphorical usage, connotation, and occasionalisms. Widening of meaning can be exampled as, for example, when once there was a word saloon, which meant a place where people organize different sorts of balls, parties. Later, now we can find saloons in the buses, in the cars, in the barber's shop, etc. So this is widening of the meaning. Next, narrowing of the meaning. For narrowing of the meaning, I can give an example of the word idiot. This word idiot in old Greek meant peasant who had a land and had a farm and worked on his farm, on his land, from morning till night, and therefore he had no time to join the community, men living around, and their way of life was a bit different. He, that is the idiotes, did not drink, did not make merry, did not join their noisy companies. Therefore, those people called him as a person of bit different behavior. And later, the meaning farmer, peasant, etc., were lost, and the only meaning, a person with a bit different behavior, became the dominant meaning, very short meaning. The meaning was shortened. See? Next one, narrow. Meaning became narrow. Metaphor. We know metaphors. Metaphors are very widely used in the language. There are two types of trait metaphor and dead metaphor, etc., etc. Genuine metaphor. See? Next, connotation. Connotation is renaming the object which has already has its own name. For example, the author of Ivanhoe means Walter Scott. The inventor of the radio means Popov. The country of rising sun, etc., etc. The ship of the desert is camel, etc., etc. Occasionalisms are words or phrases used for special occasions. No one repeats it, but the word once used remains in the language as a language fact. For example, if one says, "Are you a has-been or a no-was?" You should understand it. Have you ever been put into to jail? You see, this is an occasionalism, just like I summered in the country, we wintered on the mountain, etc., etc. See, these are occasionalisms. And the last one, stylistic change. Stylistic change of is using the word belonging to one style in another to create a stylistic effect. All those slang words, American slang, British slang, and other slangs are created on this principle. For example, in slang, the word student means a beginning drug user. That is because people of the society are divided into two parts. People who have a profession, people who have no profession, and the students are between these two groups. Therefore, they're likened to the drug users.